Welcome. My name is Brent Iverson. I'm the Dean of the School of Undergraduate Studies, and I'd like to welcome you to the Undergraduate Lecture Series. I am really pleased to be here tonight because we have a great lineup. What we're going to be talking about is in the laboratory. And most of you are probably thinking when you hear that of white coats and test tubes and goggles. Frankly, that's what I think about because I'm a chemistry professor. But I also think about closed-toed shoes, no shorts, and make sure your clothes are not flammable. But that's really not what research is. We are so fortunate to be at the University of Texas at Austin. It's a research university. And that means far more than just chemistry research. It can be research in every single discipline. In fact, the teachers that you have at UT don't just teach you about things, they create new knowledge. And tonight, we're going to hear about research into very different fields, all of which is pushing back what we know into whole new realms. So we're going to hear about a laboratory, which is really a bar, to study alcohol use. We're going to hear about the really competitive and ever-shrinking world of microelectronics and fabrication of transistors. And finally, we're going to hear about how technology is transforming the production of musical scores to movies. We really are lucky to be at UT Austin because we have absolutely fantastic faculty. And these three are great examples of that. So, I'm glad you're at UT, I'm glad you're here, and I look forward to what we're going to see. Our first speaker tonight is Kim Fromme, talking about alcohol.
Yeah, I'm choosing to talk about alcohol because it is clearly the drug of choice among most young adults. More 12 to 20-year-olds have consumed alcohol than used tobacco or illicit drugs. 70 to 90% of college students will drink alcohol by their senior year. You've still got some time. Fortunately, most will drink infrequently and without problems. And if we were talking about legal-age drinkers consuming a nice craft beer, there wouldn't be a problem. But the fact is that 56% of college men and 35% of college women are what we refer to as binge drinkers, meaning that whenever they drink, men consume 5 or more drinks, women consume 4 or more drinks. And that leads to these other kinds of problems. Binge drinkers are more likely to have hangovers, to experience blackouts, to miss class, to do something they'll regret, and to drive after drinking. And tragically, 1,800 college students die each year of alcohol-related accidents. So my research is geared towards better understanding that college drinking experience. In the interest of that, my graduate students and colleagues and I got a federal grant to study the UT experience. In 2004, I stood on this exact stage and I invited the entire freshman class at UT to join us in a research project in which we then started to study their alcohol use and their other behavioral risk from high school for the next 6 years. So here's a slide of these data. And what I've done is I've centered them around high school. So if you look over here at the high school, what you're seeing is changes in alcohol use and driving after drinking from high school to freshman fall to sophomore fall and so forth over the next 6 years. And just to call your attention to what you're seeing, the blue line is drinking frequency, how often college students drink. And you might notice a rather dramatic increase from high school to fall of freshman year. And in fact, that increase continues on and peaks at about senior year in the fall. I'll come back to that. The purple line, I realize it's a little hard to see, is drinking quantity. And what you see again here is a tremendous increase from high school to freshman year. And it increases pretty substantially into sophomore year. And then what happens, I think, is the oh my factor. How am I going to get into grad school? I better moderate. And so you see quantity going down a little bit. At that senior year, what's happening? Most of you will be turning 21. That means you tend to then drink more often, but drink less per occasion, because you don't have to drink it all just because it's there. You can buy it legally. The other thing I want to point out to you is driving after drinking, and that's the red line. Interestingly, we saw this little dip fall of freshman year. Any of you guys have a hard time talking your parents into bringing the car? The parking's a little expensive here. But by sophomore year, you've convinced them you really need a car. It's hard to get around Austin without public transportation. We also, in addition to tracking this alcohol use over time, we did a number of different studies, and one was looking at 21st birthday celebrations. We brought people into the lab within 2 days of their 21st birthday celebration and found out what they did and how much they drank. And what we began to see is this clear connection between alcohol use and other behavioral risk. And by that I mean things like, I mentioned drunk driving already, but things like unprotected sex, getting into a fight or an argument, doing things they regretted. Fully 28% of our sample couldn't remember how they got home. They were in an alcohol-induced blackout or amnesia for all or part of a drinking experience. So then the question was, well, why might alcohol contribute to these other behavioral risks? And there's a variety of reasons. The first, illustrated by the cartoon, I just do it better when I'm drunk. And indeed, people hold these beliefs about the effects of alcohol, that they're going to be funnier, smarter, dance better, better looking. All these things are great about alcohol. Reduced inhibitions. We know that alcohol reduces individuals' perception of risk. We sometimes call it liquid courage, right? You feel bolder and better able to do things when you're drinking. Subjective intoxication. That's how drunk you feel. You ever try to take car keys away from somebody? Like, I'm fine to drive. They're basing that on their subjective intoxication. So we wanted to study this as part of our research. And we do that in the bar that Dr. Iverson referred to. The Sahara Lab is a simulated bar over in the C building. Looks, smells, acts like a bar. And we are, as part of a new grant, bringing individuals into the bar. We dose them to a level of 0.08 blood alcohol concentration, legal intoxication. And then we run them through a variety of different kinds of tests, measuring things like behavioral disinhibition on different tasks, or decision making, and body sway, and heart rate, and a variety of different kinds of measures. And we're just kicking that off. We're going to be bringing about 400 students into the Sahara Lab, all these students that were part of that UT experience that started here as freshmen in 2004. We followed them for 6 years, and now we're saying, come on back to Austin, maybe around ACL or something like that, and get drunk in our bar. We'll see how that works. We just launched our recruitment this week. So this is the new grant. It's called the Genes and New Experiences Study. As I mentioned, we're re-recruiting those individuals who were part of the UT experience, and we're now collecting their DNA. We get salivary samples, no blood, And we're then going to analyze 5 candidate genes that we believe will be associated with both those different trajectories of alcohol use as well as behavioral risk, in addition to looking at how the genes are related to their measures under alcohol in the experimental bar. So this whole line of research is really geared towards looking at individual, social, and environmental factors that influence not only alcohol use, again, enjoying a little craft beer by a legal age drinker, not a big problem. But we want to understand both the genetic, the individual difference factors, the behavioral factors, the environmental, the social factors, the expectancies, the subjective intoxication, the beliefs about alcohol, and how those then contribute to alcohol consumption over time, intoxication, and engaging in these other behavioral risks. With our goal being to find ways that college students can continue to have a fun social time here at the University of Austin, University of Texas at Austin and elsewhere, without experiencing those consequences of the young woman who was passed out on the bathroom stall floor, or any of the individuals that died from alcohol-related consequences. And I'm done.
So I know what you're thinking, and we're going to keep track. Unless you actually work with Dr. Fromme, you're not allowed to tell your parents this weekend that you're just working in the lab. Okay. Our next speaker is someone who works in my department and someone I have a great deal of respect for. And let me put it this way. In my opinion, there were 3 great inventions and/or discoveries that changed the destiny of humankind. There was fire, there was wheel, and there's the iPhone. And you may not have thought that there's chemistry in here, but Dr. Grant Willson, when he was working at IBM, led a team that helped develop the chemistry that is used to create microprocessors that have enabled all of the technology that we have done. And I want you to take a second to think about what I just said. Okay. Without further ado, Dr. Wilson's going to tell you what he's working on in his laboratory right now.
Thank you. It's a strange experience. I can't quite see you, but I know you're there. I'm going to talk to you about the development of the microprocessor and the integrated circuit. And here you see Jack Noyce holding the very first integrated circuit, which consists of includes a single transistor. It was done in 1958, and this man won the Nobel Prize, but not until the year 2000. And if you have time and have the interest, you should read about why there was such a long delay before he was rewarded for this incredible invention. The history and the fighting and the question of who invented what is enough to keep you up late at night reading. And I'm going to talk to you about this subject. But before I do, I want to explain to you that I decided that I had 2 goals here. One was to tell you something about the details of our research and to persuade you that it's a lot of fun. And the other was to persuade you to engage in research. So let me tell you that there's sort of 2 reasons that I'm standing here. One of them is that my friend Dr. Iverson invited me, and I'm proud to have that opportunity. And the other reason has to do with this individual. His name is Henry Rappaport. He was my organic chemistry professor at the University of California when I was exactly at the same stage you are. And I was struggling horribly, partly because I was not highly motivated to study, and partly because I was having tremendous financial difficulties. And somehow this man recognized that I was having difficulty, or I don't know exactly what, but he invited me to participate in an undergraduate research activity in his research group doing chemistry, and he paid me. And the excitement of that research work changed my life, and the small amount of money that he gave me for working there was enough to keep me at the university. And so I will be forever grateful to him, and I, in return, have continued to support undergraduate research in my own laboratory. We have 8 or 10 kids there every semester. I don't think I've published a paper in the last many years that didn't include some of them, and I'll introduce you to one of them specifically before we get to the end. But first of all, that fellow that you saw that invented the integrated circuit, the other people that were engaged in the process and who thought they should win the Nobel Prize included Jack Kilby and a person named Gordon Moore, who started Intel Corporation. And their work led to what this famous Moore's Law. Moore's Law is depicted as a plot that you can see in this graph that shows the number of transistors on a circuit device, on a chip, against time. It's the logarithm. It's a semi-logarithmic function. And the yellow dots you see here are actual data that Gordon Moore collected back in the 60s. He did what engineers do. He looked around and tried to find some function that would linearize them, and he found that if he took the logarithm that it did that. And then he extrapolated this out forever and made predictions as to what would happen. This is what scientists do. And you see his prediction was reasonably accurate and continues for decades as the number of transistors increases logarithmically with time. And this is the famous Moore's Law, and it's a thing that drives the microelectronics industry. It's not a law like F equals ma or V equals IR or any kind of physical law. It's just an economic truth. And the truth is that if you find yourself in this section of the plot, you're not going to succeed. You're going to go away. And in fact, some very famous companies whose names you may recognize were unable to stay out of this black region of the plot, and they are no more. Even Sony and companies like that. But if you can manage to stay in this upper section of the plot, you gain huge rewards in various forms, all of which are good for you and your children. And so everybody strives diligently to stay on this line or above the line by increasing the number of transistors in die. They have to approximately double every 18 months in order to stay on that line. It's a remarkable thing. So when Kilby and Noyce started, they had 1 transistor on a device. And here you see in today's most advanced integrated circuits, this one from Intel, there are 1.4 billion transistors on a single device. It's the kind of thing that you find in the most advanced processors in your laptop, or in some cases even this kind of density in cell phones. The smallest structure in this microprocessor is only 22 nanometers wide. The wires or the connectors or the components that make up the device are only 22 nanometers wide. That doesn't mean much to you unless you have had some experience with this kind of length scale, but it's a very small structure. How big is 22 nanometers? It's hard to believe, but here is a human hair. This is an electron microscope image or an electron micrograph of a human hair. And the width of a typical hair is on the length scale of 50 micrometers or 50 microns. And here, superimposed on the hair, is a typical bacterium, something the size of a typical bacterium. So a bacterium is about 5 micrometers, roughly plus minus, in longest dimension. So you can see that it's order of magnitude smaller than a hair. And here are some bacteria. These are actually E. coli bacteria, very common ones. And superimposed on them is a virus. A typical virus is on the order of 100 nanometers or so in diameter. So we're getting pretty small. And here you see an electron micrograph of an influenza virus, which is about 100 nanometers in diameter. And you think of that as being small, and rightly you should. And here is a 20 nanometer line, about the size of the smallest wires in the device that we're discussing. And just to give you another sort of ballpark feeling, here's that line expanded, and that little dot is the equivalent size of an atom. So there are only about 50 to 100 atoms wide, these lines that are in these structures. And the fact that you can make billions and billions of them in rapid succession is a tribute to the ingenuity of man, and a shocking thing that it's even possible to do. It's really exciting and fun kind of endeavor to be engaged in. Our job in that regard is to continuously try and help the industry make these things smaller. So we have students working to make these wires smaller, and here you see Gordon Moore, the ex-CEO of Intel, watching over this to make sure that we're making them smaller at the rate consistent with Moore's law so that we don't go out of business. And we at UT have developed a new patterning technique that I'm very proud of that looks like it may allow us to make things, the next generation of things, still smaller. It's different than what's normally done. It's a simple molding process that works probably better than it should. What we do is to take a wafer that's going to become populated with microelectronic devices, and we produce a template or a mold made out of glass that is transparent, obviously, and it has the structures that we want to print etched into the bottom of it. This is expensive to make and slow to make and difficult to make. But once you've made it, you can replicate it like most molds you can imagine. We use an inkjet printer like in your printer at home to spritz down some photopolymerizable liquid and then capture that liquid in the gaps of the mold, shine light through the back of the mold to convert the liquid to a solid, and then lift the thing off and step across and do it again until we've made many, many, many such devices. And the resolution of this process seems to be limited only by what you can make in the mold. So we're working hard to learn how to make smaller and smaller molds. And we're doing this here in the Welch building and in the CPE building across the other side of Dean Keaton. So here you see a machine that has been commercialized to do this kind of process, and some of the sorts of structures that are being built by the process. Here you see, we saw the smallest transistor had smallest images today's of 20 nanometers, and here we see 14 nanometer posts, so there are 1.4 tera dots printed per square inch by the process. Very exciting kind of result, and I'm proud to be part of it and proud of the students who participated in it. It's captured the attention of a number of people. This man, whatever his name is, I can't remember, he visited Austin recently, and he's actually here looking at a wafer that was printed by this kind of machine. It was kind of exciting, to say the least. A lot of the work is done, as I said, in Welch and in CPE, and I told you earlier that I had a number of undergraduates that work with us. And I want to try and convince you that it's true that those undergraduates have to put on gloves and wear white coats and glasses, but they have an awful lot of fun. And I'll tell you a little bit about this one. This is Leon Dean. He just graduated with a bachelor's degree in June. And this kid walked across the stage with more bling than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, I don't think there was a cord or a badge or a pin that was being handed out that he didn't have attached to himself when he graduated. He won the Mitchell Award, which is several thousands and thousands of dollars award for his undergraduate research work. He won the American Chemical Society Best Paper Award that he presented the paper in New Orleans. He won the travel grant to visit New Orleans to present the paper by writing a proposal to the dean of the college of, to the vice president for research. He won an enormous number of things. And here you see some of the work that he was engaged in. Here are 11 nanometer lines. And here are 5 nanometer dots. Well, I told you there were 50 or 100 atoms in the 20 nanometer line. How many atoms are in that dot, and why does it look so fuzzy? Why can't you make this look like it has sharper edges? This is near the limit of what I think can be done. And this kid is sitting here holding a copy of Science Magazine. Science Magazine is the most prestigious publication journal in science. I think most of my colleagues would agree with that. And here's this undergraduate kid publishing his work in science. That's really quite a remarkable and exciting thing. When you do research, it has an interesting characteristic that you're going to hear about in a second. Typically, you work for a long time trying to persuade yourself and others that you had an idea that's correct. And usually it takes a long time to make that thing work. So you have failure, 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 frustration, 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 and then suddenly it works, and my gosh, you have the biggest adrenaline rush you can imagine. This kid experienced exactly that adrenaline rush, and he was featured on the web page of the University of Texas main web page during graduation last year, and there's a really nice little short video of him describing this experience. Let me let you listen to that presentation.
So the last few years I've been doing research with Professor Grant Willson, and we've been working with materials for microelectronics. A typical day in the lab, I'll probably go and make 20, 25 samples. So what they look like if we're successfully able to get them to align perpendicular is you'll see lines that maybe line up straight or are kind of zigzagging around like a fingerprint pattern. I was just kind of starting to get to the point where I was starting to get like a little frustrated, like, okay, like I've been working on this for about a year and a half, and like, you know, I knew that maybe we'd have to scrap what we were doing and try something else, you know, which is kind of the way science is. Like, you never know if what you're gonna do is gonna work, because if you did, it wouldn't be science. One day I went into the lab and, you know, just kind of did the normal process like I'd always done. But the result that day was significantly different, and for the first time I saw the kind of pattern I was looking for, and I ran upstairs and got the graduate student I was working with to come take a look to make sure I hadn't, like, you know, I wasn't seeing things. Then he saw what I was talking about, and he was just like, oh, this is good, this is good. He like kept saying that. From that moment, we kind of knew that, oh, okay, we're on to something that will probably be pretty big and we'll be able to publish it.
So that's not a unique case. There are a tremendous large number of kids that have gone through the lab and had this huge adrenaline rush experience of discovery. I encourage you to make every attempt you can to find a way to engage yourself in undergrad research and find out how much fun that feeling is. It may not be as much fun as the bar, but it's fun. Thank you.
All I can say is that is just really, really cool. And I'm glad you showed the video of Leon, because that explained the question that I had when I was seeing your presentation, and that's where the hair came from for the electron micrograph that you showed. Okay. What we're going to hear about next is something I've been looking forward to all night, because it's something I know nothing about, and I'm really excited to hear Bruce Pennycook tell us about how technology is changing how he writes music scores. Bruce?
Thank you. Thank you. I have to confess something. What I do is completely frivolous compared to my colleagues who do important and really quite extraordinary work. I'll also confess, as I began my undergraduate studies in Bachelor of Science, I was too busy playing with my rock band and failed chemistry and probably drank alcohol. I transferred into music, and because that's where my heart was. And it's not uncommon for students to come to a big, complex university like this with one idea that they had from high school, perhaps, and find something else. I did. So I'm going to tell you where that led me. We'll start with That's me as an undergraduate in 1974 with the obligatory hippie vest and long hair, working in the electronic music studios of the University of Toronto. And what you see are components. These devices are voltage-controlled oscillators and filters and all the bits and pieces from, in effect, a radio broadcast studio, which is what we initially used to make electronic music. Very rapidly, that turned into the Moog synthesizer, meaning the kinds of miniaturization by making integrated circuits took that whole lab that I used to work in and was able to compress it into a small, what we call modular, voltage-controlled synthesizer. And these are fun. We'll hear just a little track from there. Okay, well, that was Switched On Bach, which was very famous when it came out in the 60s and made the author, the composer, well, not the composer, but the performer of that quite a bit of money. It was very popular. But of course, you can do many things with digital synthesis, and I'm sure all of you have audio of some kind on your computers. How many of you are in a band or play in a band? Yeah, well, there's some. How many of you make music on your computer? Okay. Few. Well, that's what we're talking about. So the next step from the miniaturization into a keyboard modular device you could play is to turn all of that into software. And that is a plug-in, a program that runs on the computer within another program, hence we call it a plug-in. And it's a complete synthesizer with more power than the Moog or the devices that I played when I was young. Let's hear a bit of it. That's one single setting on that plugin, of which there are thousands of settings. It just runs in any standard laptop computer. So this is a recording studio. I became very interested in recording. I was a performer, saxophone player, keyboard player, and I worked in the recording studios. What did I do? I played a lot of advertisements making Pampers and beer ads and who knows what, ads for banks. But it paid very well to work in the studios, and that's what they looked like in 1960. Those are tape recorders with 2-inch tape, giant reels of tape. Well, that progressed rather rapidly. This is what a modern film recording studio looks like. This console has knobs and sliders and all the stuff you would expect, but it isn't, there's no signals in it. Those are only control data to the computers that are hidden behind, and the whole thing is run in software. So it looks like you're sitting at a recording console, and you behave like you're sitting at a recording console, but it's all being done digitally backstage by computers. So there's 4 key elements to all of this. The presence of graphical user interface, real-time analog response, meaning you can turn knobs and play things, enormous quantity of commercial software and software that we create for ourselves in the lab. And another key factor is the iteration of processes. By that I mean the same kind of thing you can do with Microsoft Word or any word processor, where you can edit, copy, delete, add, change a page, move a page, we can do with audio. We can do with sound. That was very hard to do when you wrote scores with a pencil and paper. Very hard. So this being able to iterate has changed how we make music. It's made it faster and more convenient, and in some ways cheaper, as we'll see. This was my first user interface, an IBM Hollerith card. in 1965 at the University of Toronto. And that was the interface, this card reader. I had to type my music program one card at a time, submit it to the reader, wait a couple of days for the mag tape, like in the sci-fi movies, to chuck, 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 the tapes are always moving, and then take that tape to another lab where they could convert it to sound. It was a bit like walking up to a piano, playing a chord, and hearing that chord a week later. Not a very good user interface, right? Not very iterative, to say the least. Well, this is what it looks like today. These are graphic representations of audio waveforms, which we can edit, manipulate, copy and paste, re-record. We can redo it all we want. This is a graphic representation of a recording desk. It looks exactly the same as a recording console. There's the faders, the knobs, the buttons, the inserts, but it's software. And it runs on any standard computer, PC, Mac, Linux. This is what scores look like on screen, and they've taken one of the biggest hurdles for making large-scale pieces of music out of the puzzle, and that's this one, automating parts. When you write a score for orchestra, whether it's for film or the symphony or Broadway or whatever, somebody had to take their pencil and paper, write out the violin part, write out the flute part, write out the clarinet part, right? You might have 80 parts in your score. Well, those people made a lot of money. Friends of mine did that for a living, and it was quite lucrative. But that job has vanished because these scores, these electronic scores on screen, automatically generate all the parts with the correct transpositions like they were done by a professional. We're able to interact directly with computers with things that look like musical instruments, but are not. This is a controller. We call them keyboard controllers. Why? Because they don't make sound. You plug them in with a USB, just like your mouse, and you attach them to GarageBand or Fruity Loops or whatever you have, and you play as if it were a keyboard. So this is a model of a keyboard, a representation of a keyboard. It's not the real thing. Even fancier ones with these grid arrays of light pads that you can touch and play and record and build all kinds of complex loop. Much of the techno music you might like or dance music is done with a machine like that. This loop machine, this grids, record buttons, et cetera, and a laptop. That's all you need. Here's a screen of a process. Remember I said there were lots of processes. This is an auto-tune process. You see the voice inside the waveform inside, and the boxes are squishing the pitches to the right note. Now, all of you and real musicians know that auto-tune basically sucks, but you know. Film. So now we're putting sound and film together. Film are photographs on cellulose that are guided through a projector, analog film, by sprockets. Who invented that? The Lumiere brothers in 1890 or so in Lyon, France. Well, it works. Sprockets are the guides, and they give us time because it means the film moves at a fixed time through the projector. That's critical. Remember that. This is how we edited on them. The film would be on the back spool, and then audio on sprocketed audio tape here. This is called a flatbed editing table or a Steenbeck. A friend of mine was second editor, picture editor, for the movie The Fly. She said after watching about 1,000 times The Fly throw up, she was about ready to quit that job. But anyway, that's the business we're in. So we have to fit the score to the picture. Here's the way to do it. We need the length, tempo times time. Tempo is in beats per minute. Length is in bars, not beats. Time is in seconds, not minutes. Oh, I'm confused already. well, now we're going to multiply bar times 240, divide by something or other, or look it up in about 900 pages of tables, or go completely crazy and just do it with a computer. So SMPTE timecode, Society for Motion Picture Television Engineers, was an agreed technology on how to manage time in movie and music. And we see this. When you play a QuickTime movie on an iTunes, you are seeing time code in this duration. Everything we do on the computers with audio and movies uses time code. There it is down there in the bottom of the picture. Here's a picture, an example. I have a movie inside an audio processing system, and they are locked. The time code will be exactly the same. Problem solved. My students do not have to learn how to do all of that manipulation of film and tape and sprockets and counting. It just works. So another part of it are called sample libraries, instrument libraries. These are like a giant telephone book of tiny recordings of every single sound, every single note played on every single instrument, at every single volume, at every single articulation, in the entire orchestra, all the rock instruments, drums, percussion, African instruments. I have over 100,000 of these tiny recordings that take up terabytes of data on my systems. And what does that look like? This is the studio at my studio here at UT. Keyboards, drum surfaces, little keyboards, the main computer, digital mixers, secondary computers that carry all the samples, the primary computer for doing the work, sound conditioning in the room, very high quality audio monitors, and my students use this room to make their own work, as we're going to learn in a moment. I'll play you a little clip of one of the scores I made for my class. This is a clip, and you will see the time code go right there. It's called a work print. So when you're composing, you have a work print with the time code on it. Let's play that. So I wrote this. We'll stop there on this clip. Those were all samples. There were no real instruments there. Okay, so now one of my students, Joel Love, who is a fabulous young composer, had an assignment that I made. I took a clip from Lord of the Rings and said, okay, I took all the audio out digitally. I recreated all of the audio, or as much as I could, minus the music, meaning I put in the sound effects, I put little snips of voice back in. You'll hear Gandalf and the orcs. And all of that was created so that the students could work with what you do in Hollywood. You get a print with everything but the music. Effects, dialogue, music are the three audio tracks, so effects and dialogue, no music. So, but we have a test now. This is the quiz. You have to decide, I'm going to play first this one and this one. One of them was done entirely with artificial computer-based samples. One of them is a recording by the University of Texas Symphony Orchestra, which is our top orchestra in the School of Music, brilliant players. All right, let's play A. So you're going to have to decide. Okay, we're going to jump to the second one. This is example 2. Okay, so is A the real one or B? Who thinks A is the real one? Can't see. Is A the real one? Okay. Who thinks B is the real one? Well, you guys win. And how could you tell? Well, there are subtle differences that you can hear if you're paying attention. But I'm going to tell you, if you're at home watching the TV and you're sort of on the phone and texting and, I don't know, eating a grilled cheese, you really wouldn't know that the audio, the music in the Law and Order, for example, or 24 or whatever you're watching, is completely synthetic, because it is. All of it on TV, unless it's a very, very high-end production. Okay, so that's all true. And so we could build a studio for about this, 10,000 equipment, about 15 in software. Or we could hire an orchestra at about $65,000 for 8 hours once, and come up with a bill for the director of our movie that says, well, if you give me $100,000, I can have an orchestra for one 8-hour session. Or if you give me $35,000, I'll buy all the gear and do it all myself. What do you think he's going to say? So, fewer players are making a living. This is true. There are fewer A-list, so-called performers in LA, New York, Toronto, that are making a pile of money doing film music. That's reality. There are fewer recording studios, because we don't need giant recording studios to play fake violins. Practically no copyists and all the assistants that existed in the industry prior to this. So what's good? We have a new industry with project studios, all kinds of equipment, materials, software, methods, inventions galore that never existed, and a whole new brand of composer-producers, for lack of a better word. Students like coming out of my studio are ready to go to Hollywood and do what they do, or New York, or wherever. And finally, these lower entry costs allow you, really, to do this very simply. Yes, there's a learning curve, but it's nothing like the learning curve of writing for a full orchestra by hand on paper. So, in summary, technology is disruptive, thank you to Moore's Law and the microprocessors. From digital telephony at Bell Labs to, and the telephone was the first thing they digitized. Why? To get those people that were moving the switches out of business, because it was inefficient and it was not reliable. They wanted to build digital switches. So we go from digital telephony to where we are today. We have new art forms, new pop music forms, new ways to create and new ways to work, and new opportunities for people who want to engage with this. And that's my story.
I have to say, it is just a joy to be on the faculty at the University of Texas at Austin, because I get to work with people like this. Thank you so much for sharing what you do in the lab, and I just want to thank you again. I hope that just like your signature course that looks at things from various points of view, you've seen how something like studying knowledge to create new ideas can be truly exciting and take all kinds of different forms. I would like to thank the Senate of College Councils. I'd also like to thank the Signature Course Advisory Committee for helping decide who was going to come to talk to you tonight. And most of all, I would like to thank you for coming. Before you leave, I just want to let you know it's Horn 17, Cyclones 10 at halftime. Have a great evening and have a great semester.